We once handled a case that was considered to push past the very limits of human morality. It was the summer break at the time. A 12-year-old girl, a child left alone with no one to care for her, gave birth by herself at home. In the end, due to a difficult labor and massive blood loss, she died. When the hospital received her in an emergency, they immediately reported the incident, because no matter who the father was, it was already a criminal offense. However, when we began our investigation, the truth we uncovered was even more shattering to one's worldview. The girl's name was Ju Wen. Both her parents had passed away. She lived with her grandfather, Ju Jiandong, a farmer in the village. After the incident, we found Ju Jiandong in the depths of grief. He told us he was Ju Wen's sole guardian and had absolutely no idea his granddaughter was pregnant. During the 8 or 9 months of her pregnancy, her belly had indeed protruded slightly, but he assumed she was simply growing fast, developing normally for her age. So, when Ju Wen complained of stomach pains that day, he thought it was just a common stomachache. He told her to rest, drink more water, and paid no special attention. He never imagined she was actually going into labor. That day, as usual, he worked in the fields until dusk before coming home. The moment he stepped inside, he sensed something was wrong. Ju Wen lay motionless on the bed. Her lower body and the bed sheets, quilt, and pillows were all soaked in blood. She must have been in excruciating pain that could kill and revive a person over and over before she finally succumbed. Although the case could ultimately only be ruled an accident, its social impact was far too great, so our criminal investigation team stepped in immediately. My colleague Zhao Jun and I were assigned to investigate. Because Ju Wen was only 12, under Article 236, Clause 2 of the criminal law, whether she had consented or not, anyone who had sexual relations with her was suspected of rape. We asked her grandfather, Ju Jiandong, if he knew whether his granddaughter had been close to any man. He had no idea. In such a situation, even though we didn't dare to confront him outright, we couldn't help but harbor suspicions. After all, Ju Jiandong was only 52 at the time. In rural areas, people often marry young. Becoming a grandfather at 40 was not unusual. If he were the culprit, it would mark the absolute depths of moral corruption. However, with no evidence to suggest multiple perpetrators, the only thing we could do was conduct a DNA test. Whoever the father of the baby was, that person was the criminal. Fortunately, the results showed that Ju Jiandong was not the father. So who was? To uncover the truth, Zhao Jun and I decided to investigate the entire village, including the elementary school the girl had attended. This was a village where most of the younger adults had left to work in the cities. The majority of those remaining were the elderly and young children. Ju Wen had 2 close friends, Yang Huiqiang and Ye Shanshan. All 3 were in the same class, and all were left-behind children. We spoke to them in the presence of their guardians, but Ju Wen's death had terrified them so much they could barely utter a word. The information we managed to gather was very limited. First, occasionally, on weekends, the 3 girls would go to the town together to hang out, about once a month, a 30-minute walk from the village. Just the week before, they had gone there. Second, after school, they often gathered at a small grocery store in the village to buy candy, do homework, and watch TV. We went to the grocery store. The owner was a 60-year-old man named Zhang Shicheng, a lifelong bachelor. He said he still clearly remembered Ju Wen, but insisted that he had only ever seen the 3 girls come to his shop and had almost never seen any man accompany them. Third, the principal of Ju Wen's school had been busy spinning like a top because of the intense public pressure. Her homeroom teacher, Ju Tuanyang, was a sloppy-looking, middle-aged man. Smoking as he spoke, he said he was in charge of 3 classes and couldn't keep track of everything, so he had no idea about the situation. In truth, if even her grandfather, who lived with her, had not realized she was pregnant, then it was reasonable that a negligent teacher like him wouldn't notice either. What's more, the village had many left-behind children, and the school's staff of 5 teachers was severely stretched. All of this was the result of our initial investigation into Ju Wen. I list it all here because within these clues lay the root of the crime. Just as we were compiling the files and preparing to expand the investigation, the case took a dramatic turn. people in the village tended to act impulsively, without thinking. After Yang Huiqiang's parents returned to the village, they immediately took her to the county hospital for a checkup. The results were not good. Her hymen had been torn long before. Under the beating from her parents, Yang Huiqiang gave a name, Zhang Shicheng, the elderly bachelor who ran the grocery store. Immediately, the entire village erupted in chaos. By the time we received the news and rushed to the scene, the shop was already surrounded by villagers, packed tight. Had we arrived a bit later, Zhang Shicheng might have been beaten to death. Yang Huiqiang's parents were furious, hurling curses at Zhang Shicheng without pause, while the girl clung to her mother's leg sobbing. In contrast, Zhang Shicheng looked on the verge of tears himself, his aged voice trembling as he insisted he had never done such things. But the villagers were all seething. Whatever kind of man he was in daily life, his status as an elderly bachelor had placed him in extreme danger. No one wanted to believe he was innocent. Most of the villagers were there just to join the spectacle, thrilled to see an old bachelor publicly exposed as a beast. We quickly moved to stabilize the scene, bringing everyone involved to the police station for questioning, one by one. Yang Huiqiang trembled non-stop. Her parents, needless to say, kept shouting obscene curses. However, because the day before, when we had visited their home, Yang Huiqiang had said nothing at all, we still harbored many doubts. Unfortunately, we could not separate her from her parents for questioning. The girl only stammered that Zhang Shicheng had used candy and small change to lure them into the back room of the grocery store. She went on to say that he had groped her and even raped her. When asked why she hadn't spoken up before, the girl, frightened, explained that she hadn't known such acts could result in pregnancy. Logically, this statement sounded plausible, but at that point there was no physical evidence to prove that Zhang Shicheng had assaulted Yang Huiqiang. For his part, Zhang Shicheng adamantly denied the accusation, even weeping in his aged, frail state, saying he had been slandered. He cried that, at his age, to be smeared like this was unbearably unjust. The only thing we could rely on was forensic testing. We immediately arranged for a DNA test between Zhang Shicheng and Zhu Wen's unborn child. Even with our own lab, the results wouldn't be ready until the next day. For various reasons, we could not detain Zhang Shicheng at the station. We could only warn Yang Huiqiang's family not to take matters into their own hands before we had an official conclusion. But that very night, something happened. The next morning, Zhang Shicheng's grocery shop remained closed. A familiar neighbor came knocking and discovered he had hanged himself inside the shop. When we arrived, we saw that garbage had been dumped at his doorstep. The main door had been splashed with red paint, and vulgar insults were scrawled across it. Even the wall beside it had obscene graffiti. We learned that these were done by villagers after we had taken him in for questioning to humiliate him. By then, the DNA results had come back. Zhang Shicheng was not the one who had assaulted Zhu Wen, which meant he was very likely also not the one who had assaulted Yang Huiqiang. Even so, as we were handling his corpse, villagers whispered among themselves, saying he had killed himself to avoid punishment. We knew full well that he had not taken his life out of guilt, but had been killed by the cruelty of malicious rumors. Yet, a new problem emerged. If Zhang Shicheng was not the culprit, why had Yang Huiqiang accused him? At the same time, bad news came from the classmate of both girls, Ye Shanshan. Like the others, Ye Shanshan was a left-behind child, living only with her grandmother while her parents were still away making a living. The day before, when Yang Huiqiang was taken for her checkup, Ye Shanshan had not yet been examined. But after the uproar, her grandmother immediately asked a neighbor to take her to the hospital. The results were identical. Her hymen had been torn. We were still discussing arrangements for Zhang Shicheng's funeral with the village committee when Yang Huiqiang's parents and Ye Shanshan's grandmother stormed into the village office, demanding justice. But they did not bring the girls. They brought only their anger. At first, we thought they were blaming us for investigating too slowly and failing to quickly find the culprit. But that wasn't the case. They seemed to care very little about who the real perpetrator was, because after venting their anger, we heard their demand, "Now that Zhang Shicheng is dead, who will compensate our daughters for their trauma?" That's right, even though we stressed that Zhang Shicheng was not the perpetrator, they didn't care. The situation became even more chaotic when they began making further demands, such as unseal Zhang Shicheng's grocery shop, find his assets, and use them to compensate my daughter. Of course, we could not agree. Zhang's body had not even been dealt with yet, and the shop was still sealed off. The village committee could only try to appease them, promising to handle the matter as quickly as possible, find the culprit, and arrange compensation as soon as possible. After much arguing, they finally left in anger. This struck me as very strange. At the very least, the parents of Yang Huiqiang and the grandmother of Ye Shanshan did not seem overly concerned about the truth or the fact that their daughters had been assaulted. What they cared about more was compensation. Another detail that seemed unusual. During the argument, we suggested that the investigators meet with the victims privately, but all the guardians refused. Thinking back, from the very beginning until now, we had never once had the opportunity to speak alone with the girls. Such an interview would require the guardians' consent, and every time we questioned them, the guardians were present. At first, I thought they were simply protecting their children, but after the noisy scene at the village office, I began to think differently. Perhaps they didn't want us to hear certain things from the girls themselves. Perhaps the accusation against Zhang Shicheng was not entirely of the girls' own will. But at that moment, we truly could not bypass the guardians to speak directly to the victims. The case once again fell into a deadlock. We could only turn to another line of investigation. Earlier in the statements of the two victims, there was one common detail. Almost every month, on one particular weekend, they would go together to play at the town park. We knew of that park, an open public park next to the town square, set against the hillside in a rather secluded location. At first, we had not found it suspicious that the girls went there on weekends. But with no other leads, we decided to inspect the park as well. It was an old, rarely visited park. The trees there were mostly camphor trees, a type with wide, tall canopies, commonly planted along roadsides in the south, cheap and easy to grow. It was clear the authorities had not invested much in this place. The park was poorly maintained. After checking the area, we discovered a suspicious house in the southwest corner of the park. A 3-story building with the architecture of a villa, its roof painted a cute shade of orange. This house looked completely out of place amid the old, worn-down park. We approached and knocked, but no one answered. Inside, it seemed abandoned. However, after examining the site, we noticed the path leading to and around the house was very clean, unlike the dusty, neglected areas of the rest of the park. This meant someone had definitely been coming there recently to clean. To learn the origin and purpose of this yellow house, we went to the park's management office. The person in charge, surnamed Zhang, was a man in his 50s. Mr. Zhang told us the house had originally been planned for commercial use, as a hotel or restaurant, but after it was built, it no longer complied with the state's new policies. Because it's an open public park, commercial operations were not allowed. Thus, the building had been sealed off by the authorities on the grounds of illegal construction. I couldn't help but ask whether anyone had entered recently or if someone came regularly to clean. Mr. Zhang firmly stated, "No one at all. It's sealed off. No one can enter. Even we, the management staff, cannot go in. The keys are not with us." It was obvious he was lying. But at that moment, we didn't need to expose him outright, since we had no concrete evidence. We then requested, "In that case, could you show us the security camera footage?" I only wanted to check whether the 3 girls had visited the park the previous weekend. But Mr. Zhang went into a long-winded explanation. "Sorry, there are no cameras inside or outside that building. In fact, this park hasn't had a maintenance budget in years. The cameras are from the original installation, and there aren't many of them, only a few at the main gate and some in other areas. There are none at the back entrance." Quickly interjected, "We don't need footage of the building, just show us the camera at the main gate, the entrance and exit." At this, Mr. Zhang nodded repeatedly. "All right, no problem. I'll take you to the monitoring room." I must say, this park was truly run down. For such a large area, there were only about 10 cameras, and the storage period for the footage was only 7 days. Normally, in public spaces like this, the minimum should be 1 to 3 months. Still, 7 days was enough. We did indeed see the 3 victims on the footage. On the screen, the 3 girls were holding hands, happily walking into the park. The sight stirred something in me. After all, Juwen was already gone, and for Yang Huiqiang, life from now on would surely be difficult. I also noticed something else. Although the park had 10 cameras, in all the footage we viewed, only the main gate camera had captured the 3 girls. After that, they were nowhere to be seen. Mr. Zhang explained that the park was large. The girls could have gone to the pavilions to do homework or to play in other areas. Not appearing on camera was normal. Normal? Not necessarily. We requested a copy of all the camera footage in the name of assisting the investigation, then left. I knew that Yellow House definitely had a problem, but I hadn't expected the problem to be that frightening. After returning, we sent an official request to the entity managing the Yellow House, asking them to cooperate with the investigation. To us, this was just routine administrative procedure, but unexpectedly, it was like stepping on a landmine. Our captain, Lao Zi, was summoned to an emergency meeting. When he returned, the first thing he did was find me and Zhao Jun, the 2 main investigators on the case. He said, "You 2 keep investigating, but stay away from that Yellow House. Focus on finding that beast of a culprit." We were utterly shocked. All the clues pointed toward that house, and now we were told not to investigate it. How were we supposed to find the perpetrator? But Lao Zi gave no answer. From that moment on, we were unable to access any further information about it. From that point on, anything related to the Yellow House was blocked off from our investigation. Just then, something even more serious happened. In the whole tragic affair surrounding Zhang Shicheng, there was one person who should have appeared, but never did. Zhu Wen's grandfather, Zhu Jiandong. When the entire village believed that Zhang Shicheng was a child molester, Zhu Jiandong showed no reaction whatsoever and didn't even appear at the grocery shop. This was highly unusual. The reason was that he had his own suspect, but instead of telling us, he had decided to investigate on his own, and this caused the matter to spiral out of anyone's control. When we next saw Zhu Jiandong, he had been beaten badly. His face bruised and swollen, and was at the police station. Crying, he told us, "The one who killed Xiao Wen beat me like this. It was Zhu Tuanyang. He's not human." Through tears, Zhu Jiandong recounted his story. Immediately, I remembered the name Zhu Tuanyang, the sloppy-looking middle-aged homeroom teacher of Zhu Wen and the other 2 girls. He was not just a teacher, but also a distant relative of the family. Xiao Wen had respected him greatly. Who would have thought? Who could have imagined? Jiandong then described in detail how he had confronted Zhu Tuanyang himself and ended up being beaten like that. At first, Jiandong wasn't certain that Zhu Tuanyang was the culprit. He only wanted to talk to this relative to better understand the situation. After all, it had been Zhu Jiandong himself who had once asked Zhu Tuanyang to teach and guide Zhu Wen well. When Zhu Jiandong found Kunyang in the school dormitory, the man appeared sincere and full of grief, apologizing repeatedly for not being able to take good care of Zhu Wen. Zhu Jiandong did not blame him. He simply wanted to know who had violated Zhu Wen. Zhu Tuanyang, of course, denied everything and claimed to know nothing. But then something strange happened. Under Jiandong's persistent questioning, Su Zhang suddenly said he would give him a generous sum of money as compensation and hoped he would stop investigating, go live a quiet life. This immediately set off alarm bells for Zhu Jiandong, who refused to let the matter go. Zhu Tuanyang grew impatient. Seeing he couldn't get rid of him, their argument escalated into a physical fight. Younger and stronger, Zhu Tuanyang knocked down, then cursed angrily. And in the middle of his shouting, he blurted out something shocking. "They were all done by me. What can you do about it?" "Old fool, I offered you money and you wouldn't take it. Shameless." When I heard this, my heart lurched. In a case this sensational, no ordinary person would dare say such a thing, unless he was not in his right mind, or unless he was not an ordinary human being. We calmed Zhu Jiandong, told him to go home and wait for news, then immediately went to the elementary school to confront Zhu Tuanyang. Because if Zhu Jiandong's account was true, there was definitely something wrong with Tuanyang. Why would he say something so dangerous, something that served him no benefit? Why would he suddenly offer compensation? And this next meeting with him. What happened next at the elementary school dormitory truly left me utterly stunned. We met Zhu Tuanyang there. He greeted us warmly, but it was clear he already knew why we had come. Before we could even ask a question, he took the initiative to show us a torn wound on the left side of his forehead. According to him, Zhu Jiandong had kept pressing him to say who had assaulted Zhu Wen. He claimed he didn't know and thus couldn't answer, which made Zhu Jiandong furious. The old man allegedly grabbed an ashtray and hurled it at his head, causing the wound. That, he said, was why he fought back and hit Zhu Jiandong in return. As for the matter of monetary compensation and the assault of the 3 girls, he flatly denied it all, saying it was slander by Zhu Jiandong. The 2 sides told completely different stories. Clearly one of them was lying. Right there on the spot, we began analyzing his account. First, we asked Zhu Tuanyang to recount in detail how he had been attacked. He complied, but made a mistake. He said Zhu Jiandong had suddenly gone crazy, grabbed the ashtray on the tea table with his right hand, and thrown it hard at the left side of his forehead. For someone else, that detail might raise no suspicion. But we had interacted with Zhu Jiandong many times, and we knew something important. I asked Zhu Tuanyang, "Do you know that Zhu Jiandong is left-handed?" He looked puzzled and shook his head. As expected, they were only distant relatives. He hadn't even bothered to notice. If they had truly interacted closely, he couldn't not know about it. He sneered, "So what if he's left-handed? He could still use his right hand." I patiently explained, yes, he could, but in the heat of sudden anger, a person's instinct is to use their dominant hand, in his case, the left, not the right. You understand? After speaking, I picked up the crystal ashtray. Besides, this thing will easily retain fingerprints. We only need to test it to see whether he touched it at all. Fell silent, unable to refute. Zhao pressed him, "Why did you lie?" Even when exposed, he remained calm, smiling without panic. We didn't understand how he could be so composed until he opened his mouth again. After a few mocking chuckles, Tuanyang suddenly dropped a bombshell. Because everything Jiandong said is true. Zhao Jun and I exchanged a frozen glance. He continued, "Since you didn't bring a camera or recording device, I'll tell you the truth." He was right. Video equipment for investigations wasn't commonly used until 2008. At that time, if you didn't bring a DV camera, there would be no video record. That's right. I did those kids. What can you do to me? Jun and I were struck dumb. We'd encountered suspects who turned themselves in but never won this brazen. I thought I must have misheard. After all, we were criminal investigators. Went on, still calm. They're young, so it feels great, and they're obedient, easy to control. At that age, a teacher's words are absolute truth. He nearly leapt to his feet. I quickly held him back. Tuanyang was clearly provoking us. I didn't want to fall into his trap. He continued speaking. "Let me tell you, there are levels in this world. Don't you get it yet? A teacher and a student are like heaven and earth. Whatever I want to do to them, they have to obediently let me do it." Still wore that calm, unconcerned expression. I couldn't understand how he could speak so arrogantly in front of the police, nor where he got that confidence from. "You don't think I'm confessing, do you? I won't have to go to prison. You don't know the situation. You two are just low-level cops. Do you really think you can deal with me? Haha, it's just breaking a toy. What's the big deal? Besides, I didn't kill anyone. She was just unlucky, too weak to survive. But yes, it's a pity. Zhu Wen was such an entertaining toy, so cooperative, such a pleasure. Couldn't hold it in any longer. Son of a..." he shouted, then lunged forward and punched Zhu Tuanyang square in the face. His fat head snapped to the side from the blow. I knew Zhu Tuanyang was deliberately provoking us, but I couldn't stop Zhao Jun. Even I wanted to hit him. After a flurry of blows, we escorted him back to the Criminal Investigation Unit. We thought that after Zhu Tuanyang's insane confession, the case would be over. But in reality, things were only just beginning. Once back at the unit, Zhu Tuanyang refused to cooperate with giving a statement, only repeatedly shouting that he had been beaten. Zhao Jun and I didn't worry much about that. Even without his testimony, we had other ways. First, find the 2 remaining girls to testify and identify him. Second, take his blood sample for DNA testing. If it matched the fetus inside Zhu Wen, he would be finished. After making an arrest, the first step is to notify family members. But we found that Zhu Tuanyang had no relatives in the area. It wasn't surprising he lived alone in the school dormitory. His parents had died early, his ex-wife had divorced him more than 15 years ago, taking their son and daughter away from the village. This was also why, on weekends, when other teachers went home, he stayed at the school. He had no home to go to. We called his ex-wife, but her reaction was extremely cold upon hearing of his arrest. She showed no emotion whatsoever. This was somewhat suspicious, but with more urgent matters at hand, we didn't dwell on it. We quickly went to visit the families of Yang Huang and Ye Shanshan, but things didn't go as smoothly as we had imagined. Yang Hu's family flatly refused to cooperate, insisting that Zhang Shicheng was the culprit. They even said that after receiving compensation money, they would leave this place so their daughter could start a new life elsewhere. We didn't know who had promised them compensation. The case was far from over. The suspect had not been confirmed, so there was no basis for any payout. They refused to cooperate, not allowing us to approach Yang Jiang. Ye Shanshan's family was the same. Her parents had returned, even harder to communicate with than her grandmother. They too insisted that Zhang Shicheng was the culprit, and said that to protect their daughter, they would not allow us to discuss the matter any further. It was as if these parents had been bought off. Zhao Jun and I both had headaches over it. We went to the village committee, hoping the officials could help persuade them, but they also advised us to back off. They said, if they don't want to talk, there's no point in pushing. Those families all favor sons over daughters. The daughters aren't the precious only sons, so they were left behind in the countryside, while the sons were taken elsewhere to live comfortably. Before, they made a big fuss simply because they wanted money. Now that they have it, they won't bother to get involved. I didn't understand, so I asked immediately, who gave them the money? The village officials looked at each other, puzzled. They even asked back, wasn't it you guys who paid them to settle the case? Clearly, they had only heard from the 2 families that money had been received, but didn't know which agency it had come from. I recalled that Zhu Tuanyang had also mentioned offering money to Zhu Jiang to hush things up. That immediately made the matter feel even murkier. We went to the elementary school principal to confirm whether the school had paid any compensation. It hadn't. We couldn't trace the source at all. That day, we returned empty-handed, without any evidence to convict Zhu Tuanyang. And the next day, more bad news came. The DNA test results were in. Zhu Tuanyang was excluded as the biological father of the fetus in Zhu Wen's body. Suddenly, we lost all opportunity to charge him. No physical evidence, no witnesses. Worst of all, we had no formal statement from Zhu Tuanyang. Yes, Zhao Jun and I had heard him confess with our own ears, but the problem was, after we brought him back to the unit, he immediately retracted everything. And there was another extremely unfavorable factor. He had injuries. He used them to accuse us of coercion and assault. During the investigation, Captain Lao Zi called us in to talk. Although he trusted us, he said, "The pressure from above is huge. You two have caused big trouble." He sighed, then said, "The city bureau chief received a complaint saying our unit used coercion without evidence, and it's about Zhu Tuanyang's case. Did either of you touch the ashtray that day?" I had definitely picked it up, which meant I had left fingerprints. Zhao Jun was about to argue, but I knew how serious the matter was, so I immediately stopped him. The situation was extremely unfavorable. The wound on the left side of Zhu Tuanyang's forehead matched his accusation exactly, and combined with the bruises from Zhao Jun's punch, it was enough to establish the act of using corporal punishment. I immediately said I was willing to accept disciplinary action. In that moment, I suddenly understood why Zhu Tuanyang had dared to speak so arrogantly. Perhaps he simply wanted to show off to me, to prove that no matter how much we investigated, we would get nowhere. When I said this out loud, Zhao Jun looked at me in shock, and Lao Zi gave me a meaningful glance before saying, "Take a few days off. Zhao Jun, transfer to another case. This one doesn't need you to follow anymore." Zhao Jun still wanted to say something, but I quickly stopped him. I didn't want both of us taken off the case. If that happened, there would truly be no one left tracking it. After Lao Zi left, Zhao Jun began blaming me. But I only told him one thing: you must not get suspended. You have to stay on this case. No matter who takes over, you must see the investigation through to the end. Understood? It was only then that I realized I had already been suspended. If he had reacted any more strongly earlier, Lao Zi might have suspended him as well. At that moment, he began to understand that things were far from simple. Hadn't been bluffing. There truly were tears in this world. At first, we thought he was only talking about the relationship between teacher and student. But no, he was hinting that he had protection from higher up. Just like this time, the pressure to stop the investigation came from above. As unwilling as we were, that was the reality. We might very well lose the right to keep investigating. So, besides Chuanyang, who else had assaulted the 3 girls? Was this connected to that yellow house? And what was the origin of that house? I once thought I would never find out. But then there was a turn of events. That afternoon, Zhao Jun called me, his voice full of frustration. He said not only did he have to personally release Zhu Tuanyang, but he also had to apologize to him in public. He too would be suspended. Grinned smugly and waved his hand in a grand manner. "I forgive you. Just be more careful in your work from now on, and don't go slandering good people." Nearly ground his teeth to dust. I told him to calm down because this was far from over. I believed was not only vile, but also stupid. He was overconfident, thinking he was untouchable because someone above was protecting him. The reason was likely simple. He had evidence of the crimes committed by his co-offenders, which he could use as leverage. But he was too foolish. Someone like him, causing big trouble, even if protected, it would only be to silence him, not out of any real concern. Those sitting at the top aren't fools. Sure enough, that very night something major happened. I hadn't expected it to come so quickly, and I couldn't do anything about it. Tuanyang was dead. This also confirmed that he had indeed been one of those who assaulted Zhu Wen. We hadn't arrested the wrong man. Soon after, Lao Zi called me and told me to return immediately to assist. When I arrived, my colleagues had already processed the scene. Zhu Tuanyang had died in his single dorm room at the school. The scene was soaked in blood. He had clearly been murdered, tied to a computer chair in the room. The fatal injury was to the back of his head from being struck with a household hammer. The killer clearly meant to end him. The back of his skull was nearly split open. In addition, his body bore many other wounds, not even counting internal injuries. Just from the external injuries alone, we were horrified. Large slash wounds across the body from a knife, a badly bruised face, multiple teeth pulled out while he was alive, fingers and toes smashed to pulp with a hammer. Most shocking of all, he had been castrated alive with scissors. From the blood spatter, it was clear most of the injuries had been inflicted while he was still alive. The killer, and he must have had a deep grudge. Because it was summer break, almost no one was staying in the teacher's dormitory, so there were no witnesses. At that time, the school's cameras didn't have night vision, and the security guard had gone out drinking. In other words, the school was practically unguarded. But that didn't matter. We quickly figured out who the killer was. It was Zhu Jiandong. After the murder, we tried to contact him immediately, but couldn't reach him. His house was empty. Fortunately, the crime scene left behind plenty of evidence. The killer had virtually no counter-investigation skills. There were shoe prints, fingerprints, fallen hair, and other evidence, all perfectly matching the samples collected from Zhu Jiandong's home. There was no doubt, Zhu Jiandong was the killer. So how did we confirm that Zhu Tuanyang was a pedophile who had assaulted the girls? Besides the physical evidence at the crime scene, we found something even more horrifying in his room. Dark, filthy, disgusting. By then, personal computers were becoming more common, and Zhu Tuanyang had one in his room. But it was password protected. When Zhao Jun and I investigated earlier, we hadn't been able to break it. We'd been too busy and had no search warrant. Now that there was a murder, the digital forensics team got involved and quickly cracked the lock. In a hidden folder on the hard drive, we found several horrifying videos, all summed up in 4 words: sexual abuse of young girls. In those videos, we saw faces far too familiar: Zhu Wen, Yang Huiqiang, Ye Shanshan, all students of Zhu Tuanyang. Based on that, we could state with absolute certainty that Zhu Tuanyang was the one who had assaulted the girls. Zhu Jiandong's motive for killing Zhu Tuanyang was clear. He was avenging his deceased granddaughter. I also thought back to the fact that Zhu Tuanyang had been divorced for over 15 years, and his 2 children didn't live with him. When we had notified his ex-wife of his death, her attitude had been extremely cold, almost indifferent. Whether it was the divorce or her indifference afterward, it was likely for the same reason. She must have discovered Zhu Tuanyang's perverse, inhuman tendencies and had fled with their 2 young children. I called Zhu Tuanyang's ex-wife again, hinting to see if she knew about this. She vaguely admitted it, but clearly didn't want to say more. That was understandable. She had likely struggled greatly to escape that monster. I didn't press her, as I didn't want to stir up her worst memories. My only purpose in calling was to determine Zhu Tuanyang's crime timeline. From experience, people like him, if left to offend for a long time without being caught, often recruit like-minded accomplices. We still had one crucial piece of evidence. The biological father of the fetus inside Zhu Wen was not Zhu Tuanyang. In other words, he very likely had an accomplice. Later, our technical team provided further proof to support this suspicion. They had categorized those vile videos. None of the perpetrators' faces were shown, only the victims. However, they discovered that the filming location was not on the elementary school campus. Most of the clips had been filmed in the same place. This meant that Zhu Tuanyang and his accomplice had a fixed location for committing their crimes. In one clip, the window frame happened to be in view, and outside was a large camphor tree. This type of tree is often planted along roadsides in the south, so it couldn't pinpoint a specific location. But I immediately thought of that park, the Yellow House. Not just because there were many camphor trees there, but also because Zhu Wen and the other girls often went to that park to play every week. It was highly possible that Zhu Tuanyang and his accomplices had committed their crimes right inside that Yellow House. Therefore, I believed this case needed to be investigated thoroughly, and I reported it to Lao Zi. But before I could finish speaking, he cut me off sharply. Don't do anything crazy. Right now, the criminal is still on the run out there. Instead of catching him, what are you doing daydreaming? Zhu Jiandong, find him and bring him back immediately. I say he's a murderer. Indeed, at that time, Zhu Jiandong was still on the run, but I believed he couldn't hide for long. From the crime scene of Zhu Tuanyang's murder, it was clear he had no counter-investigation skills. Catching him was only a matter of time. Moreover, while in hiding, he was unlikely to harm anyone else. His motive for killing Zhu Tuanyang was obviously revenge for his granddaughter. He was a killer, but not a cold-blooded murderer who killed indiscriminately. I had interacted with him before, and I believed this, but I was wrong, because Zhu Jiandong committed another crime. I had thought he was hiding merely to avoid punishment, but I hadn't considered another possibility. We didn't know what Zhu Tuanyang had said to Zhu Jiandong after being tied up. Zhu Jiandong wasn't precise in counter-investigation, but he was quick, familiar with every mountain path around the village, making him extremely hard to track. At 50 years old, after a lifetime of manual labor, he was in strong physical shape. That was how he could subdue and torture Zhu Tuanyang so easily. And before we could catch him, he struck again. This time, the victim was someone we knew, Director Zhang, the man in charge of that small-town park. Fortunately, Zhang didn't die, but was seriously wounded and hospitalized. According to his account, around 8 to 9 p.m., he was walking home after work, taking a shortcut through the park. In the dark, a figure suddenly rushed out without a word, holding a fruit knife, slashing furiously. Even though Zhang tried to run, he was cut several times, wounds to the shoulder and back. Luckily, before collapsing, he managed to shout loudly for help. 2 park security guards heard him and rushed over, and only then did the knife-wielding man flee. At the hospital, we showed Zhang a photo of Zhu Jiandong. He confirmed immediately. It was definitely him. A large-scale manhunt began at once. Because of the seriousness of the case, higher authorities gave it great attention. Captain Lao Zi personally commanded the operation, coordinating multiple units for the search. All traffic security cameras were requisitioned. With an operation of this scale, I thought the time had come. I took the chance to tell Lao Zi, we must clarify why Zhu Jiandong attacked Director Zhang. There must be something hidden behind this. That night, while being tortured, Zhu Tuanyuan must have revealed many things, perhaps including Director Zhang or the Yellow House or other beasts in human skin. But Lao Zi ignored it, even sternly saying, the most important thing right now is to catch Zhu Jiandong. Everything else can wait. That's an order. Following orders, we carried out the manhunt all night. Using the cameras, we determined that Zhu Jiandong's location was a small mountain near the village, a place he knew well. After committing the crime, it was understandable he would flee there. Moreover, on the way up the mountain, we discovered fresh footprints. Beside them, there were blood-stained leaves, possibly from the knife blade smeared with Zhu Jiandong's blood brushing against them while he fled. This proved our investigative direction was correct. The mountain was not large, its entrances and exits clearly defined, so we immediately sealed them off for a search. Hundreds of police officers were mobilized, carrying searchlights and lighting equipment, combing the entire mountain in the thick darkness. It was bitter to think about. We were ready to mobilize the entire city's force to catch a farmer avenging his granddaughter, yet unwilling to devote even a fraction of that force to uncovering the truth and protecting the flowers of our nation's future. With a scale like this, if he still held a weapon and refused to surrender, the chance of being shot on the spot was high. That's why Zhao Jun and I rushed ahead. Though small, the police team split up to search while moving forward, and we deliberately went ahead, separating from the formation. Fortunately, we were indeed the first to find Zhu Jiandong. He was hiding in an old cattle shed. This area had once been used for livestock, so the sheds were still there. We shone our flashlights in and immediately saw his figure. Zhu Jiandong tried to run, but Zhao Jun fired a warning shot and shouted loudly, "Zhu Jiandong, don't run! Drop your weapon and get down on your knees." Only then did I see that in his hand he was still holding the knife. Hearing the gunshot echo through the mountains, he didn't run anymore. He turned and knelt heavily on the ground. I was about to surrender, but his hand still gripped the knife tightly. I repeated, "Drop your weapon." We slowly approached, not daring to get too close. Then I heard his hoarse voice. Spare me. I still have things to do." He thought that after killing someone he could still be spared. Zhu Jiandong continued sobbing, pleading through choked sobs. I beg you. My Wenni still can't rest in peace. There are still people. There are still others." I understood then. The so-called unfinished business was that he hadn't yet killed Director Zhang and the other accomplices of Zhu Tuanyuan. Perhaps during the torture of Zhu Tuanyuan, he had forced him to reveal the full list of partners. I quickly spoke. "Zhu Jiandong, drop your weapon. As long as you tell us the rest, we will handle it for you. Trust us." But his reply was full of anger. "You? How could I trust you? Even that scum Zhu Tuanyuan you didn't dare to touch." We were choked with emotion. Zhu Jiandong's voice softened again, as if pleading. "Spare me. I can't die yet. Let me kill a few more of them. Once I've killed them all, I'll take my own life." He no longer cared about living or dying. He just wanted to slaughter a few more beasts wearing human skin. But I knew that was impossible. Zhao Jun knew it too. He kept shouting, "Zhu Jiandong, drop the weapon immediately. You can't escape. The whole mountain is surrounded." But Zhu Jiandong didn't listen. He slowly stood up. Perhaps he realized begging us was useless, so he started grinding his teeth and roared, "Tell me, don't they deserve to die? Don't they? They did those things. They killed my granddaughter. Don't they deserve to die? Tell me they don't." Zhu Wen was only 12 years old, because she was tortured and humiliated until she became pregnant, without even realizing it herself, and died in childbirth, finally thrown away like garbage. Don't they deserve to die? I couldn't answer Zhu Jiandong's question. Zhao Jun could only keep repeating the command, "Drop the weapon." "Drop it now." I think Zhao Jun also knew we didn't have much time. The gunshot earlier would have been heard by our other teammates. But Zhu Jiandong only grew more agitated, tears streaming as he cried out, "I must give Wenmi justice. I must avenge her. I can die, but I must kill them all of them." He was nearly insane, but somehow, on some level, I could understand his madness. Zhao Jun was still shouting desperately, "Drop the weapon!" But it was too late. I saw many flashlight beams approaching from all directions. Zhao Jun almost screamed as he begged, "Put down the knife, please, I'm begging you." But Zhu Jiandong refused to let go. Maybe he didn't understand what we meant. He didn't know that in such a remote, wild mountain, once a bullet hit, there would be no way to save him in time. Yet he began stepping forward, knife still in hand. "If I can't kill them all, what's the point of living? Drop the weapon. Trust us." Zhao Jun was still yelling, "Bah! You're all the same filth!" Zhu Jiandong suddenly lunged forward. Bang! Another gunshot rang out. It wasn't fired by me or Zhao Jun, but by one of the teams that had just arrived. The bullet struck Zhu Jiandong in the thigh. He collapsed to the ground. Zhao Jun and I rushed in, kicking the knife away and performing first aid on the spot. But in despair, we saw the bullet had hit his femoral artery. The bleeding couldn't be stopped. We carried him down the mountain and rushed him to the nearest hospital, but we couldn't save him. He died. Under the white hospital lights outside the emergency room, Zhao Jun and I stood frozen for a long time. "You're all the same filth," those words echoed endlessly in my ears. In the end, whose side were we on? The suspect was dead, and the case was wrapped up quickly without causing a major public stir. The victim's family was stabilized, and the dead even more so. Our superiors seemed very satisfied. But as we continued to monitor the aftermath, an even bigger problem emerged. Yes, there was another turning point. There had to be, because we still didn't know exactly who or what was living inside that yellow house in the park. Once again, I went to see Lao Zi. Even if it meant turning against him, I wanted him to give me the authority to keep investigating. I didn't expect that this time there would be a complete reversal. Unable to stand my pestering any longer, Lao Zi shut the office door and said to me, "Don't be impatient. The truth is, I'm already coordinating with another department on this investigation. If you guys act on your own, you'll alert the snakes and scare them away. That's why I haven't allowed random investigations." I was stunned and quickly asked about the progress. Lao Zi explained, "It's going very well. In less than 2 days, we can close the net on Zhu Tuanyuan. Of course, there are accomplices. Director Zhang from the park is one, and there are several teachers from other elementary schools as well. If we don't investigate thoroughly, we can't catch them all in one sweep." That was great news. It felt like a fog lifting in my heart, finally clearing my doubts. After that, everything seemed to go smoothly, almost suspiciously so. 2 days later, Lao Zi led us in closing the net. This case involved many underage girls, as well as 4 teachers from 4 different elementary schools, not to mention that Zhu Tuanyuan was already dead. So all actions were carried out quietly to avoid stirring up public opinion and causing social instability. Yes, maintaining stability was the highest priority. According to the statements of the 4 teachers and Director Zhang from the park, they had colluded to use threats, bribery, and brainwashing to control the students, ultimately turning them into tools to satisfy their vile desires. They were worse than beasts. Director Zhang was responsible for providing the venue, the yellow house. After being arrested, the suspects were extremely cooperative. Even though some evidence wasn't entirely conclusive, they still took the initiative to confess. Keep in mind, this was the crime of rape, with a minimum sentence of more than 15 years. Yet these slick-tongued teachers didn't offer a single word in their own defense. It wasn't that confessing was bad, but their excessive meekness made it feel as though they were under enormous threat, perhaps to their own lives or the safety of their families. That inevitably made me think about the death of Zhu Tuanyuan. Yes, he was killed by Zhu Jiandong, but was it certain that Zhu Jiandong was the only reason he died? Could it be there was another motive? For example, someone higher up wanted him dead because he had said too much? No one could be so brazen before the police. Once, maybe it could be covered up, but if there was a second time, What if next time he revealed something bigger? So perhaps the moment he left the station that night, he was killed. And that would explain why Director Zhang and the other suspects confessed without hesitation, with such an air of sincerity. But I had no proof. There was one more thing that still nagged at me: the Yellow House. Director Zhang claimed it was simply a weekend gathering place where they exchanged students with no other purpose. I did not believe there were no monetary transactions there, perhaps even money traded for power. You have to understand, to possess that house, it wasn't something Director Zhang could do alone. Those other teachers didn't have high incomes, nor did they have much money. If they were using that house just to commit such depravity without gaining a large profit from it, that would make no sense at all. No one takes such huge risks for such tiny rewards. What's more, I still clearly remember that when I tried to investigate the Yellow House, the moment I contacted the relevant department, Lao Zi was immediately summoned to a meeting. That kind of power was beyond what Director Zhang could command. I continued to raise my concerns with Lao Zi, and he agreed, saying he would report it upward. If it needed to be investigated deeply, then it should be investigated deeply. But unfortunately, right after reporting it, both he and I were summoned to the Public Security Director's office. At first, the director offered praise, complimenting the criminal investigation team Lao Zi led, commending our record of solving cases. Then his tone changed. He began speaking about our role in society, emphasizing that contributing to society was what mattered most. Lao Zi countered, stressing that we needed to uncover the truth. But the director's tone grew sharper and sharper. On the surface, he was talking about the case, but beneath it, he was speaking about something higher. One sentence in particular hit me like a hammer. As long as the victims' families are compensated in full, that's enough. Why bother knowing the truth? We're just tools to maintain stability. What right do we have to approach the truth? That sentence left both me and Lao Zi speechless, because he was right. After receiving full compensation, the families of Yang Huiqiang and Ye Shanshan no longer pursued the matter, even though we didn't know who had paid the compensation or how much it was. But the director's words were the truth. As Zhu Tuanyuan had once said, there are levels in this world, and violent institutions like ours are merely tools at the lower level for maintaining stability. For people at our level, stability is all that matters. Another thing the director said stuck with me. The truth will certainly exist, but that truth is not for us to expose. Don't worry, I'll give you an explanation. His words implied that this case was connected to people at a higher level. Matters belonging to the higher-ups can only be handled by the higher-ups. Not only were we forbidden to investigate, we weren't even allowed to know the truth. After leaving the director's office, Lao Zi lit a cigarette right there indoors, ignoring the smoking ban. As we walked, we talked. I told Lao Zi my suspicion. I believed that whether it was Zhu Tuanyuan or the other predatory teachers, at most they were just procurers, handling the supply. The Yellow House was the consumption venue. The consumers were those above, people with money and power, and in those days, sometimes even with the power to take another person's life. Lao Zi said nothing, just kept smoking. Perhaps he had already thought of this, but what he had in mind went even further than mine. He then said something surprising. Maybe it's a good thing. I was taken aback and didn't understand. Lao Zi frowned, exhaled smoke slowly, and said, "Even if we knew everything clearly, it would be useless. Do you know there was a ridiculous change a few years back?" I quickly tried to think how that might connect to our current case. I immediately thought of the crime of soliciting sex from underage girls. In 1997, 5 years before this case, the criminal law had been amended, separating the crime of soliciting sex from minors into a distinct charge. This charge was different from the old criminal law's definition of rape. In other words, if our suspicions were correct, the mastermind behind it all would not be prosecuted for rape, but only under the crime of soliciting sex from minors, a sentence of just 5 years or more. I understood at once, even if we caught them, they could not be severely punished. Perhaps the public security director really had been right about going back and forth with the truth. Lao Zi exhaled another stream of smoke, the haze covering his entire face. About half a year later, a political storm began brewing from the top. Many high-ranking leaders in various sectors fell one after another. Numerous tycoons topping the wealth rankings were also arrested. The Discipline Inspection Commission, Economic Crime Police, and Public Security all became involved. Every one of them was criminally prosecuted. Some were even sentenced to death. Perhaps it really was a case of evil begetting evil. At the same time, that yellow house was demolished. I don't know if this was the explanation the public security director had promised. Perhaps it was, but we will never know what dirty transactions had taken place inside that yellow house. Perhaps the truth really does exist, but there are truths we will never be able to see.